County up around the northwest side of Atlanta.
Okay, we're just about ready to get started here. At the risk of getting myself in trouble, there's one person in the audience that I want to introduce to you. You'll probably get on to me after I do it, but I'll just ask for forgiveness after that. Lux Flanders Gambrell is with us today, and if you ride around this campus out here, you'll see the Lux Flanders Gambrell building over here. And some, I guess almost 30 years ago now or more, Lux was generous enough to donate the land that this college sits on. And our technology park, which joins the college, is another 100 acres right back here. She was also so kind as to donate that land as well. And she's certainly one of our favorite daughters and does so much for not only this community but for this area. But thank you for coming and being with us today. Next, I'd like to call on James Kennedy. James is chairman of the Manning County Commission for a word of welcome. James, come right up to the podium.
Thank you, Butch. It is indeed an honor this morning to come before this distinguished group. We are very pleased to have each and every one of you here in our county. I feel like we are very lucky to have Representative Parrish and Senator Hill represent us in Atlanta. Most of you have known right recently there's been a lot of exciting things happening here in our county, and we're pleased that they have been a strong supporter and backbone of that. But again, good morning. Welcome to Emmanuel County, and anything you all may need, feel free to call on me, or we have the mayor here, Swainsboro, with us. Any way we can help you, please let us know.
I'd like to call on Charles Schwabe, who's the mayor of Swainsboro, to give us a word of welcome.
Thank you, Butch. Just let me echo Chairman's comments. It's great to have all of you here. It's good to see old friends coming back, and it's good to see new faces here in Emmanuel County. I want to thank everyone here, you folks up front and you folks out here as well, for your interest in being here and for the things that you all do for this state. I think it's important that we have this kind of input and involvement in formulating public policy. Of course, we all know the best ideas come from South Georgia and they move north. So we're in the right place today, and I want to welcome everybody here. If we can do anything at all for you, please let us know. Let me say one thing before I leave, and let me again reiterate what James said. We're so fortunate to have Jack and Butch on our team, and they are both just extremely capable. Their expertise and their wisdom we're just so fortunate to have that, and besides that, they're just both downright nice guys. So did I get that right? Yeah. Thank y'all very much.
And now I'd like to call on Dr. John Black, who's president of East Georgia College, to say a few words. So Dr. Black.
Thank you, Representative Parrish, and let me add my welcome to each and every one of you. The college president is always tempted when he has an audience to give you a commercial. So I want to tell you a little bit about East Georgia College because we're proud of it. And in a minute, our technology will catch up here. Looks like it'll be about 10 seconds, as a matter of fact. But East Georgia College is a hidden jewel. I talked to several people last night about it. And thanks to Ms. Luck and this community, it's here. And it's a gateway to higher education. And in the late 50s, the Georgia Assembly and the governor committed to having education within at least 2 years of higher education, within 50 miles of every Georgian. And a lot of schools popped up. They were called junior colleges back then. East Georgia College was one of those. Bainbridge, Dalton, Gainesville, Columbus. Oh, not Columbus, excuse me. I'm thinking about the World Series. But we're here because this community wanted us here, and it taxed itself to bring us here. And we want things to happen, and we appreciate Senator Hill and Representative Parrish and their bringing things here. You'll see that the House Speaker is featured up there in that upper right-hand picture. Some of you remember Speaker George L. Smith, and we were very pleased to have one of our buildings named in Danny. Oops, there it goes. We started in '73, and what I want to tell you is the enrollment is good. We're over 1,800 this fall, and we had a record enrollment last year with 1,500, and so it just continues to grow. So we'll be back talking to the General Assembly often as we continue to grow. Senator Hill and Representative Parrish, you have heard that they are involved with us, and they were here at Honors Night to represent the General Assembly in awarding plaques and proclamations to a couple of worthy students. In just a minute, Jack Bareford is going to have a chance to talk to you about our Georgia Rural Economic Development Center that's here on this campus, and I won't take any of Jack's time. We've had, for a long time, for 30 years, we didn't have a new building, and we've been fortunate enough with enrollment growth to add the building that you're in on the left, and then the Gambrell Center that Representative Parrish has already mentioned, which is an absolutely beautiful building. And, pardon our construction, but our new Student Center and Student Service Complex is coming up across the street. So when you come back next year, we'll be able to move away from a small room into a little larger room across the street. We've always had community support. We recognize on the left, back in 1998, not Mayor Swaby, but a mayor-to-be. That's right, mayor-to-be, and the other mayors in support of this community. We have something that I invite you all to participate in. We have a vision series here. You may know it by Lyceum, where we bring speakers and musical presentations to the campus for the community and for the students. They're all free. They're in the Gambrell Auditorium, and people that have played in Spivey Hall tell me that the acoustics are comparable. We didn't try, it was serendipitous, but we had a good architect, and so come and listen to the Augusta Symphony, or the Atlanta Pops when they come. The Augusta Symphony will be here on the 28th of September again, what has become an annual event. This may be the largest group of folks that we've had in the gym in a while since President and Ms. Carter were here a couple of years ago. We have some faculty and staff that are the best I have ever seen. I have been in several schools and had the opportunity to interact with a lot of folks. This is Dr. Alan Brazier receiving the Faculty of the Year Award for all two-year schools in the university system. Alan teaches English, among other things. He also plays the guitar and is very active in the community. Our foundation chair, Ray Woods, last year won the Regents Distinguished Alumni Award. Michelle Goff, our Director of Plant Operations, won one of 3 system awards for facilities. So it was the year of the Bobcat last year. We swept the table. We have faculty that are involved in research. Dr. Glenn Strocker is the premier expert on coal fires. How many of you knew that there are uncontrolled coal fires burning all over the world right now? 1, 2, 3, 3. I didn't know that either, but they are. You can't put them out. And Glenn has traveled the world studying this phenomenon and working to try to put it out. He does that. We're not a research institution, but we have faculty that do research. He teaches his normal full load. He's been interviewed by the BBC. He's working with the Discovery Channel to put together a special on this program. So can you imagine what he brings to the classroom when he talks about geology? We hire our own. This is not a complete group, but these are graduates of East Georgia College bobcats, and we have wrestling, and we have choral groups. And if you know students that want the best place in Georgia to transition from high school to college, send them here. We can do it. It's what we are proud of. We are the gateway to education. We're looking to the future. We'll come back, and with Jack and Butch's help, we need to add a few more classrooms, and we're in a cooperative mood. We want to bring 4-year programs from Georgia Southern and Georgia University of Georgia here to this campus. Thank you for indulging me for just a minute. Welcome to East Georgia College. We're proud to have you here. Have a good meeting.
We're going to go ahead and get right into the program now. We've got a lot to cover, and we're going to try to move along pretty quickly. And what I think the best format for us to be when we have the presentation, the presenters make their presentation, leave a couple of minutes at the end of their presentation for some questions that might come up here, and then we'll just move right along. Right now, I'd like to ask Martin Neesmith to come up and make a little presentation with us. Many of you know Martin. He's now in the Claxton area, automobile business, and he has served on the board of regents, and he's well known throughout this area. And as a businessman, he's somebody we'd like to hear from. Martin, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Butch, and we're very fortunate to be represented by Butch over in Claxton and also Senator Hill, and it's a pleasure to be in the company of such distinguished people here. I thought this was going to be a small gathering, but apparently a lot of people are interested in taxes. Hey, Jack, how are you? Dr. Black, I want to congratulate you on such a beautiful campus and facility, and as a member of the Board of Regents, we are very proud of your campus here, and it continues to grow, so thanks for all you do. My name is Martin Neesmith, and I own 3 new car franchise dealerships in Southeast Georgia and 1 used car franchise. I've been in the car business for 32 years. I'm past chairman and member of the executive committee of the Georgia Automobile Dealers Association, and I also represent Georgia's new car franchise dealerships on our national board of directors for the NADA, National Automobile Dealers Association. I want to thank you, Butch, and the rest of the committee for letting me be here today and allowing me to talk to you about something that is very important, not only to new vehicle dealers here, but also all Georgia consumers, and that is taxes, all sorts of taxes. And let me say I'm so proud that you are looking at tax reform, because it does need to be reformed here in the state as well as in the nation. I have handouts. I believe they've already been given to the staff to give to you, so it'll tell you more about, going to more depth of what I'm talking about today. Let me start by saying that the average price of a new vehicle sold here in Georgia is $26,000, and the price of a used vehicle we sell is about $13,500. In 145 counties in this state, the total sales tax paid by a customer is 7%. 4%, of course, goes to the state, and 3% to the local governments. This means that on the average, each time a consumer purchases a new vehicle, an additional $1,820 is added to the overall purchase price. I tell you, I sure would, and I know all the other dealers in Georgia would like to trade places with the state and county and make 7% on every sale. I guarantee you it'd be a wonderful thing for us. Although Georgia's state tax rate is similar to those of most other states, Georgia's overall sales tax rate, when you add for local options, puts Georgia in the top 50% of total sales tax charged. One factor which I think contributes to all these high tax rates is the cost to operate in governments. In 159 counties, we just got a lot of counties here in Georgia. Georgia sales tax, along with all other taxes and fees imposed on businesses and consumers, make it harder for Georgia dealers to compete. Here's just a sample of some of the taxes and fees that factor into vehicle prices. Federal and state corporate tax, federal and state payroll taxes, state unemployment tax, tire fees, lemon law fees, property taxes, ad valorem taxes, local taxes, business license fees, and of course sales taxes. Ultimately, all of these taxes and fees are taken into account when a vehicle is priced. hurting Georgian consumers and new vehicle dealers. Each year, GADA, Georgia Automobile Dealers, publishes a study of new vehicle dealers' impact on the Georgia economy. The results of this study are startling. The most recent study shows that new vehicle dealers in Georgia collected and are paid over $1 billion in state and local taxes during 2004. This equals or equates to an average of $1.7 million per dealership. Over $900 million of these dollars were for sales tax, an average of $1.4 million collected per dealership. And those of you who are in business, I don't have to tell you what a real burden that is to collect all that money. And basically you get nothing for it. We collect for the state and the counties, and it's really a very time-consuming thing to do. Georgia borders several states with lower tax rates on motor vehicles. The most glaring example of this is in South Carolina. In South Carolina, the sales tax rate is 5%. However, the sales tax on vehicles is capped at $300. Another example is Alabama. Alabama has a separate tax rate for vehicles. The rate is 2%. That's for state. And even when you add local, county, and city options, the maximum sales tax rate charged is 3.375%. North Carolina. Vehicles are subject to 3% highway use tax in lieu of sales tax. As I mentioned before, figure the average price of the vehicle at $26,000. In the majority of counties here in Georgia, sales tax, I said, would equal $1,820. Compare this with $300 collected in South Carolina, $878 in Alabama, and $780 in North Carolina. Because of this difference, Georgian consumers perceive they can go out of the state to purchase a vehicle and pay a lower tax rate. While a Georgia resident will eventually pay Georgia sales tax, and many of them don't know this after the fact, their perception is that they'll pay a lower tax rate by going out of the state. This causes the dealers in Georgia to lose hundreds of sales every year, which does not end up going to other states rather than come back to Georgia in the form of corporate tax and things like this. Of course, you'll get your sales tax, as I mentioned, most of the time. As the members of this committee consider proposal about Georgia taxes, I'd like to ask that you consider a cap on sales tax for motor vehicle transactions. One way to offset this cap would be to remove an unfair sales tax exemption that currently exists in the law. Georgia is one of 3 states that exempt casual sales of motor vehicles from sales tax. No other southeastern state has such an exemption. Besides putting dealers in a competitive disadvantage, this exemption is unfair to car buyers that want the security of purchasing a car from a licensed dealer. A consumer who purchases a vehicle from a dealer must pay sales tax on that purchase, yet a consumer who purchases a vehicle from an individual pays no tax. Eliminating the exemption for casual sales of motor vehicles would ensure that all customers purchasing a vehicle are treated alike. Current estimates of the revenue that would be generated removing the exemption for casual sales could be as high as $100 million to the state and $50 to $60 million to the counties. That would go a long way to offset the tax relief created by a cap. Now, I realize, and this was brought up before several years ago on the casual sales, and I'm sure you'd make allowance for people selling within family members. But what's happening, we have a lot of people who are setting up little businesses and not ever getting licensed or anything. They're selling 4 or 5 vehicles, and they never get taxed. So the state is currently losing millions of dollars on these, really. And I'm sure you've seen them parked all over beside the roads and parking lots for sale, and these aren't just casual sales, or they're casual sales, but a lot of times it's many more than one sale going through from that individual. And remember this, cars and trucks, even if you put a cap on it, are something that keeps giving. Every time it goes in for service, there's a tax, Valorem taxes, just so many taxes on on cars and trucks that it just keeps on giving to the county and city governments, or county and local governments. So I'd like to thank you today for the opportunity to come speak with you, and I'd like to entertain any questions if you have them, please.
Some of the surrounding states that you quoted in regards to caps and lower taxes, do they have, and I don't know the answer to this question, do they have inventory tax for automobile dealerships in those states?
An inventory tax. Bill, can you answer that? No. Bill's Maury, our executive director of Georgia Automobile Dealers, is back here. So.
I'm talking about the dealerships.
But as you may know, we have inventory tax on everything other than vehicles. All our parts. I mean, it's it's a lot of tax. Well, good. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to that cap next year. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call on Alec Rice, who is the president of the Samaritan Luggage from our neighboring community by day. They also have an operation here in Swainsboro. And Alec serves on the Georgia Department of Technical and Adult Education Board. He's a small business man. Alec, we're glad to have you here.
Thank you, Butch. I'm glad to be here, and I want to thank you and Andy Riley and Charles Swaby. They've helped us come to this community and succeed. We have 2 plants in Vidalia and 1 here in Swainsboro. We made luggage for years. That all went to China. And now we make military gear, body armor, salt packs, tactical gear, that kind of stuff. I like to say we're trying to do the impossible. We're trying to be in the manufacturing business in America. We believe that not everybody can sell insurance, work at the hospital, and sue each other. Somebody actually has to. Those are all growth industries. Somebody actually has to make something in this country. Hey, Bill, how you doing? There's my chamber director. I'll make it short. What I wanted to say about tax policy is what is really working on manufacturers today outside of the foreign competition. Everybody knows now we live in a global economy. What's working on companies now, it's not exactly taxes, although taxes, as Martin pointed out, are a problem, but it's the cost of health care, it's the cost of workman's comp, it's the cost of property and casualty insurance. It's the benefit cost. Now, I'm not sure, I'm not a tax expert, so I'm not sure how this can be tied to tax policy. But it seems to me, I was talking to Ron Stevens about it last night, healthcare costs, everybody knows it, are just completely out of control. We're having to pay something on the order of $10,000 a week in healthcare costs in our company. That doesn't include workman's comp or property and casualty. These benefit costs are rising rapidly. They seem to be out of control. I'm wondering what we can do from a tax policy standpoint that would enable companies to deal with these costs and enable manufacturers essentially to stay in business, because we're putting the people to work. We are trying to go forward, but these benefit costs are just outrunning our ability to fund them. And I'm just wondering, you guys are smart, you know how to do these kinds of things. I'm wondering how we could craft a tax policy that would allow us to deal with these things if Georgia is interested in having a manufacturing base. And obviously I think Georgia is, but that's one thing I would ask the committee to consider. Any comments or questions? Yeah, I mean, it winds up on the back of the state and federal government. I mean, everything has to be paid for.
Yeah, it was sort of a loaded question. I agree. I think that's something that we have to look at. You know, that's a non-trivial equation to do with the, you know, exactly how do you do that. But I appreciate you opening the door on that discussion. I think it's most worthy.
I'm wondering if the legislature could not literally think outside the box and try to devise, and I'm not interested in another government program, I'm sure you're not either, but what could be devised so that large numbers of manufacturers could participate in these things? You know, the bigger the pool, the more money you have, everybody pays in, and deal with these rising costs. Is, you know, just an idea. Okay, thank you for inviting me. Okay, thank you.
Next, we'd like to hear from Jack Barker out here at East Georgia College Rural Development Center. Jack?
Thanks, Representative Parrish. Dr. Black already showed you a slide about the Rural Center here at East Georgia College. And for the legislators, there's a handout on your desk. In the interest of time, I put that there, and I will keep my comments very short. Anyone in the audience who's not familiar with what we do, I'll be glad to get one for you also. But we're a public-private partnership. We're funded by the University System's Intellectual Capital Partnership Program, and we had a large private donation to the East Georgia College Foundation earmarked for economic development. We've been around since the end of 2000. We do rural economic development programs and research, and with the intent that all economic development organizations have to improve the quality of life for rural citizens, and we focus primarily on low resource communities and counties, particularly Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. We have several major programs. One of our most effective programs is our Entrepreneur Outreach Program. We have an Entrepreneur Outreach Specialist who we contract with Georgia Tech, in actuality, to provide a manufacturing-focused entrepreneur specialist. And he just happens to be here today. Matt Oxley. Matt, stand up so everybody will see what you look like. But Matt actually goes out into the field, stays in the field, doing hands-on work with entrepreneurs. Everything from plant layout, you name it. Whatever it takes to keep that business effective and get it started, he'll help them with. Matt's got a varied background. He successfully owned a manufacturing company for many years. He was in the banking business for many years. He's an engineer. So he's really qualified to go out and help these entrepreneurs. And we do a lot of collaborative work with the other state organizations, the small business development centers. We collaborate between each other and refer clients back and forth between each other. We don't try to duplicate efforts, but we work together in a collaborative relationship to leverage the funding that we have and to do the best possible job we can. But we also do grants to communities, and again, predominantly the Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. And the intent of the grants are to form models that can be replicated in other rural communities. And I'm going to stop it right there. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. We have a website. It's just gredc.org, but it does a very thorough job of showing you what we do and the services we provide, as well as examples of the kind of grants we fund.
Hi, I'm Asa Garrett, right here local from Swainsboro. Me and Frank Pridemore are here today kind of representing the Georgia Home Furnishing Association. Frank has been instrumental working on the inventory tax, and Frank is associated with Badcock's. He owns 2 Badcock stores down in South Georgia, and he's been working pretty intensely with that program, so I'll kind of turn it over to him now for let him tell you about what he's been doing, and if you have any questions, I'm sure he can answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Asa. I do own 2 Badcock stores. Been in the furniture business for 35 years since I was a delivery man at the store in Plant City, Florida, in high school. And I own a Badcock store in Douglas and Coffee County, and good friends with Greg Goggins. He put braces on my daughter some years ago. And Chuck, we've had some dealings with Chuck Sims down in Douglas as well. I know he's worked with Representative Martin on the Ways and Means Committee. And for some of you from this particular geographic area, bring you greetings from Benji and Mary Varnell, who used to be at First United Methodist Church here. They're now my pastoral family. So we have some connections. But I own the Badcock store in Douglas and also the one in Valdosta in Lowndes County. And Representative Stevens, I testified spoke in November at one of the subcommittee hearings on ad valorem inventory taxes, went to Savannah and spoke. I realize we're talking about a much broader issue right now, and I know that there are municipalities and lobbyists and other people who can throw a lot of statistics at you, and I have just a few that I'd like to lift up. I'm a sole proprietor. I'm not incorporated. I'm part of a big company, but I own my own business. As Asa said, I represent the GHFA, which is the Georgia Home Furnishings Association, but neither one of us are paid lobbyists. Asa is on the board of directors. I'm a second vice president and will eventually be president of that organization. And so in that regard, I represent over 500 furniture stores and furniture representatives who work in the industry in the state of Georgia. The ad valorem inventory tax that we pay every year to our local municipalities, according to a study that was done in 2003 by the Center for Business and Economic Research at the University of Tennessee, found that Georgia retailers, which the furniture stores are a part of, pay the state, now this was in 2003, keep in mind, $212 million to the state for the ad valorem inventory tax, as well as $270 million to the local municipalities, cities, and counties that we also pay the tax to. And one of the things I'd like for you all to give serious consideration to, Chairman Parrish, is looking at someone offering enabling legislation to become a participant in the Streamlined Sales Tax Project rather than staying on as an observer. Right now, the state of Georgia is an observer to the Streamlined Sales Tax Project and is not, there are 31 states that have signed on to this initiative and have adopted enabling legislation. If you would do that, the same study in 2003 by the University of Tennessee estimates that Georgia would realize $675 million in revenue from internet sales alone, sales tax collected on internet sales alone. Now, if you add the $212 million and the $270 million that I mentioned just from retailers for the ad valorem inventory tax, you can see an over $200 million increase in revenue if you would sign on to the Streamlined Sales Tax Project for the state of Georgia. Let me also say that on a personal level, on my store in Douglas and my store in Valdosta, if I didn't have to pay this tax every year, I could maybe afford another delivery truck or another employee, or as the gentleman from the Automobile Dealers Association said, he pays that ad valorem inventory tax on parts and other equipment that he has in his business. He doesn't pay it on his automobiles because 12 to 15 years ago, they were able to get an exemption for the Automobile Dealers Association. I pay it on the furniture in my warehouse and on my floor. And sometimes, if something doesn't sell well, Asa, that happens, doesn't it? We pay that tax on the same piece of merchandise 2 times, 3 times. Eventually, the tax, if it's a real bad piece of merchandise, we could pay as much in that ad valorem tax as we paid for the merchandise to begin with. Let me end with an analogy I came up with on my own, so I can't blame it on anyone else. If you'll think of Georgia's economic engine as perhaps, how proud we were of having the Olympics here 10 years ago. Think of Georgia's economic engine as maybe an Olympic boxing team. There are several components to that economic engine, and but the big glamorous one, the retail industry in Georgia, drives the economic engine in Georgia as far as employment, sales tax, several other areas. As the heavyweight on the boxing team, the retail industry is being constrained by tax policies such as this ad valorem inventory tax. And when we get into the later rounds of the fight, the guy in South Carolina across the corner, or the guy in Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, or Alabama, the trainer in their ring has water, Gatorade, Vaseline to cover up the cuts and scars and bruises. Well, the last 3 or 4 rounds of the year, when we should be ramping up our inventories, the last calendar quarter of the year, October, November, December, we're having to mentally cut back so that we have lower inventories when it comes time to figure that tax. So if you're our trainer and we're the heavyweight on the boxing team, get us the same supplies that the other folks have so that we can finish the fight. Any questions? Yes, sir.
If you do not have that inventory tax, I assume that your corporate income would increase, so you'd be paying corporate income tax on additional revenue, so that would help offset some of the...
Not only that, Representative Royal, but also I would expect increased sales tax revenues because instead of trying to operate with a reduced inventory during the Christmas season, we would be able to stock what we need and increase sales. Of course, as you say, increase income taxes. Also, as I alluded to, 500 and some furniture stores in the state of Georgia that are part of the GHFA. If each of those stores added 1 employee, look at the income tax that would help. Also, personally, I have in mind we offer. At my 2 stores, we participate some in health insurance for our employees because I've always felt that that's that's a good deal for my employees. But the fact is, many small businesses in the state of Georgia can't afford health insurance for their employees, and that's why the issue of health insurance cost is such a big deal. I think if I didn't have to write the check to Coffee County every year or Lowndes County every year, maybe I can increase my participation or buy a little bit better plan. There's any number of things that we could do with that revenue, but you're right, it would increase corporate tax rates that the state of Georgia would enjoy, as well as sales tax that they would have increased revenues from.
The only problem with that, though, is the corporate tax would be going to the state, and the local governments would be losing inventory tax, so we'd have to figure out a way to equalize the tax shift. The inventory tax primarily funds local government.
Yes, sir.
And the corporate income tax would go to the state.
Okay. There are 40 states in the union that have figured out how to do that. There are only 10 states. Last year, I don't know if anyone else has done away with it, but there are only 10 states that have this ad valorem inventory tax, and none of the bordering states to Georgia have it. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We appreciate that. Next, I'd like to call on Andrew Ward from Tuscaloosa from beautiful Lake Oconee to come talk to us about some tax issues.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Ward. I'm the CEO of Tuscaloosa Golf Resort out on Lake Oconee in the heart of Georgia's Lake Country. We're in the historic heartland. I was Businessman of the Year for Putnam County a few years back and just finished 6 years serving on the Chamber of Commerce as a Board of Director. And I now work with Joy Wallstrom for TDAG, Tourism Development Alliance of Georgia. I was raised way out east over the pond, so please excuse my accent. If I say any words that don't quite sound right, please don't laugh at me. That's just the way we talk over there. I'm here today to talk about Hotel Motel Tax. Just give you a brief overview of what it is, what it funds, where it goes, and if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Basically, I'm a resort hotelier, so I'm not a tax expert. But in the mid-70s, Tom Kilgore and Moy Lambert presented to the floor legislation that allowed for 3 pennies of tax to be charged for hotel motel tax establishments. This was an Atlanta hotelier idea. They decided that there would be a great way to put money into the local tourism and promotion area. And the idea was to charge everybody that stayed in a hotel these 3 pennies of tax at the end of their stay, and the person collecting the money would be responsible for distributing it. In the county, it would be the commissioners, and in the city, it would be the mayor and the councillors. One of the first places to benefit from this was the World Congress Center and the CVB in Atlanta. Whether or not this was what the money was supposed to be used for is for something of debate. But tourism is definitely a benefactor from those 2 buildings, and so one looks back and thinks, well, that was a great way to use that money. The law was passed, and the local entity now collecting these funds decided what they would do with the money. And over the next decade, relative freedom was given on where the money was spent. Sometimes it was used for other projects. Sometimes it was used for the general fund. And there was concern throughout the hotelier industry that there was not enough teeth in this law to make sure that the controls were in place, that the elected officials used this money in the right place. So in the mid-80s, due in part to this concern, a new law was passed enabling an extra 2 pennies to be added to the tax. But this entire amount had to be used solely for tourism. This would ensure that at the very minimum, 40% of what was collected of the 5% would go directly for tourism. This tax proved popular, if there is such a thing, because it was paid by the pass-through tourist and it was benefiting the local communities. In 2003, Mickey Chenell proposed to the floor yet another amendment to change this legislation, which gave much clearer and defined instructions of where that money was to be used. There was also a watchdog put into place to look over the use of these funds and to give concerned members of the community a place to go if they wanted to voice concern on where their local community was spending this money. Overseen by the Department of Community Affairs, yet made up of public and private sector members, the board meets regularly, and in 2005 had 4 cases come before them. All of those cases were brought forth with concern that the 40% of the 5%, those 2 pennies, were being used in areas which did not relate to tourism and tourism promotion. If you think of it as a road map, the money is supposed to be spent on map, marketing, advertising, and promotions. This board is able to insist that incorrectly used funds are refunded and used in the right area, even if those authorities need little time to collect the money to pay back. The hotel motel tax collected is supposed to be spent in the same year in which it's collected. It's not supposed to be held on to in little pots for rainy days. While cities and counties can actually use the entire 100% of the 5% collected, you tend to find that mostly just 40% that is mandated to be used for tourism is what is given, the balance going into the general fund. In my county, Putnam County, for example, the city gives the chamber 40% of what's collected, that's the 2 pennies on the 5 pennies, yet the county gives 60% of what's collected, i.e. 3% out of the 5% goes to tourism. The balance of the funds go into the respective general pots, but from our county that then goes to pay for Better Hometown, Keep America Clean and Beautiful, Tree City USA designation, and beautification of the city. $1,000 every month is spent on plants around Eatonton. So in effect, really, all of the hotel motel tax collected in the city and the county is used for tourism. In another of Georgia's Lake Country counties, Baldwin, The CVB arranged with their city and county to collect the entire 5% of the hotel motel tax. What they gave up was the $60,000 a year that they were being funded previously by the city and the county, and instead of collecting that money, they decided they would just take the hotel motel tax, the 5%. 2 years later, they were already collecting $70,000, and they've gone on to collect more per year than the city and the county were ever funding them. So this is, in a way, a win-win for the county and the city, because those funds are all being used for tourism. In Greene County, which is another of Georgia's Lake Country partners, despite early-on mistakes, like using the hotel motel tax to pay for the light bill out on I-20 intersection, that was a no-no. The county has seen huge increases in hotel motel tax because of the Ritz-Carlton on Lake Oconee opening. A special tourism board has been established containing representatives from city and county, and they get together on a tourism alliance basis and decide where the money should be spent within promotion, within the marketing, advertising and promotion field. Morgan County, Georgia's Lake Country's other partner, benefits from over 600 hotels at the hotel rooms at the I-20 intersection in Madison. The city takes their 5% and uses it all through the CVB. The Welcome Center, the Main Street program, and other special events are paid for, all out of the tourism dollars collected. The county allocates all of their tourism-related expenditures through the tourism hotel motel tax collected. Georgia's Lake Country itself, of which I'm a trustee, are considering approaching all the county and city officials of our 4-county region and suggesting that an extra penny is added to the hotel motel tax, and this money is used entirely for funding Georgia's Lake Country marketing, which is an alliance that the 4 counties came together to promote tourism for our region. At the very least, use it to fund a manager to oversee and set up and run our marketing company, which has been very successful in creating tourism for our region. The Travel Industry of America, the TIA, compiles a list of travel expenditures in every county, and as such, information is readily available for anyone to use for research about their respective regions. The TIA breaks down how many businesses are supported by tourism through wages, tax revenues, and other issues through the city and county. But before I conclude, let me address the tourism issue for the hotel motel tax. The Georgia Department of Economic Development states that visitors outnumber locals 3-to-1 in Georgia. Of course, they stay overnight in hotels, not in their beds at home. Over 35 million people stay in Georgia each year. 75% of those, surprisingly, are on leisure, with 25% on business. The median age of visitors to Georgia was 49 in 2003, and that dropped down to the age of 43 in 2004, and if that trend continues, we see it being under 40 years of age for the first time this year. A staggering 81% of the traffic that comes into Georgia come by car, and they on average travel 450 miles. But for every $1 they spend on tourism in Georgia, $7.74 is generated in Georgia income, according to Marketing Workshops back in 2004. In 1950, 80% of households in the USA were married couples, and yet today it's dropped to under 50%. There are over 82 million American adults and singles in America. That's a whole lot of tourism opportunities, and the impact of their travels in Georgia can be seen on a handout that I give you at the end through the TIA. I'm also pleased to report that in June 2006, Georgia led the nation in growth in hotel revenues with RevPAR. That's the revenue per available room. When you look at June 2005 to June 2006, Georgia as a state was up 23%, and yet the rest of the nation on average only managed 7%. We seem to be a long time coming out of the troubles of 9/11, but now one of the strongest states in the nation as far as room and hotels, which leads to hotel motel tax. The hotel motel tax is a key self-imposed tax. It's a popular tax, like I said before, because it's paid by the tourists passing through. I think the idea here is that the tax doesn't need a complete overrun. It doesn't need to be looked at and rewritten and redeveloped. But it's very important that we ensure that only those tourism, promotion, and marketing projects is what the 2 pennies on the dollar is spent on. We need to address some loopholes, if there are any out there. For example, those places selling hotel nights on the internet, they're not charged hotel motel tax. If you book it online and go through Hotel Motel Tax through one of these hotels.com, they're not charged Hotel Motel Tax. There are places out of state collecting funds for hotel stays that are not contributing towards that. You also may want to look at the Hotel Motel Tax that's charged for length of stay. I believe it's after 14 days it's no longer charged. We may want to take a look at that. People that stay longer term in hotels, after the first 14 days, I believe, could be 10, I'm not sure, they're no longer charged Hotel Motel Tax for their stay. There are also some government offices or government bookings of rooms which might be, I believe, they don't pay Hotel Motel Tax. We may want to take a look at that too, see if there's any loopholes there. Really, the Hotel Motel Tax is a great way of raising funds locally in the county and the city. In our own region, as I stated, we're hoping to create a new penny on that and use that solely in its entirety for the promotion of tourism. I thank you for coming today and listening to me talk about Hotel Motel Tax. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Thank you. It's a great return on employees, on employing employees in Middle Georgia. It's a fantastic way to train and keep your staff. So, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Next, we're going to hear from Chris Clark, who's representing the Department of Economic Development. Chris, go ahead and hear that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we can pull up that PowerPoint, and there was you got the. Good to be with y'all today. Unfortunately, Representative Martin heard this same presentation about 5 days ago, so I went ahead and gave him a fair warning. What we'd like to do, first, thank you for giving us the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to be with you today. What we'd like to do is to give you just a quick update of the last fiscal year for the Georgia Department of Economic Development and share with you the results of a recent survey that we did with Georgia small business owners. That mirrors a similar study that was done recently by NFIB, and then we'll be happy to take any questions. And we'll try to touch on a little bit, too, as we go through this, the border county issue as well. 2006 was an incredible year for the Georgia economy. And what you see there are the last 4 fiscal years, with 2006 being in green and kind of a total on your far right-hand side. You can see the number of prospects that we've been working with has increased dramatically over the last few years. And on Friday of this week, you can read in the Atlanta Business Chronicle a story about our new business development team that we started about 15 months ago that get a lot of credit for the number of prospect and leads that we have. 254 announcements last year. Now, that doesn't mean that there were only 254 companies that came to Georgia or expanded. Those are the ones that we worked with. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but you can just see the dramatic increase over 2005 to the numbers there that we had this year. Those are companies that are expanded, that are new locations to Georgia, that are maybe high-tech startup companies, and companies that have for the first time gotten involved in international trade that we've assisted. Those 254 companies this year will create just under 25,000 new jobs. More than double what we had done in 2005. And the really dramatic number there is the amount of investment into the state of Georgia's economy, $5.7 billion worth of new investment. And I'll have a slide next that just kind of breaks the top 10 or the top 8 of those down for you. The number of those that received any type of incentives, Mr. Chairman, was 31, which is about 12% of the total. And on average, and when we talk about incentives in this matter, we're talking about discretionary incentives, the One Georgia Edge funds, the REBA funds, and those equaled out to around $4,000 per job for those 31 companies that required that type of assistance. Our teams called on just under 2,500 companies this year, and did over 2,600 visits to Georgia communities. Our export numbers continue to grow at about $1 billion a year. We estimate that 2006 numbers from the federal government will be just over $21 billion worth of exports in and out of Georgia ports. These are the big announcements that we had for this year. Kia, obviously, is the one that everybody's read about. They'll employ just under 2,900 workers directly. There'll be another 2,600 jobs that will follow those with 5 suppliers. AirTran, 2,500 new jobs in the Atlanta area, 2,000 with Aflac, Gulfstream, 1,500 new jobs, Purdue Farms, Ream, NBTY, and Hewlett-Packard. An interesting thing about this list is half of these announcements occurred on Georgia border communities. Kia on West Point, you can throw a rock and hit Alabama from where the site is going to be. Obviously, Aflac expanded in Columbus there. MBTY as well, and obviously Gulfstream in Chatham County. This is a good mix of expanding businesses, of new ones, but those are the ones that have the largest impact. There was probably one we could add, Mayor, Huber, we probably should put on that list. I think they'd probably come in at about number 10 with investment, and that was one of the largest announcements in this part of the state, and proud to announce that project. 62% of all of those 254 announcements that we discussed, 62% actually occurred in rural Georgia, and that number is up significantly over the past. Of all the prospects that came to Georgia that we took out to look at land, to look at places they could build their plant, 81% of those companies were shown property and industrial parks in rural Georgia, which is a huge increase over previous years. But what we're seeing is more and more rural Georgia communities are competitive. They're getting into the hunt. They're marketing themselves better. And the fact that, Kia went to a town of 3,000 people, West Point, Georgia, is a pretty good indicator there of what rural Georgia can really do. What leads us to some of those numbers? Excuse me, why are those numbers so good? One reason is the amount of international activity we have now. We have 10 international offices all over the world. We will soon open a new office in China. Commissioner Lesser just returned from Beijing last week, interviewing staff there. But you can see that the amount of economic development activity going on internationally, 42 outgoing missions this year. The governor led 4 of those. There were 380 Georgians went with us on those 42 trips this year. And a big change from what we've done in the past, it used to be that we would go on these trips and we would take Coca-Cola, and we would take UPS. Well, they didn't really need us to take them to these other countries to do new business, but what the governor's directed us to do and what we've been very successful in the last 18 months is actually take more and more small Georgia companies with us. I got an email just yesterday, a small company that went with us with the governor to Canada just inked a new deal to that'll make him add about 3 or 4 new employees to his business, and it doesn't sound like a lot when you look at those numbers on the last slide, but he'll have $250,000 of new revenue this year. He went with us for 3 days on that trip. Alan Rice went with the governor on the trip to Israel this year. And more Georgia small businesses, we're trying to expose them to the opportunities that are available to them with international trade. The newest area for us and kind of the focus that we wanted to focus on today with this committee, Mr. Chairman, is our efforts with small business. 3 years ago, the department really had no small business activities, but yet of the 600,000 Georgia businesses, 95% of them have fewer than 50 employees. So we really felt we weren't quite doing the job that we needed to do assisting small businesses. So our first step was to coordinate the 18 different state agencies that somehow support small businesses, folks like Allen and SBDC, our friends at Georgia Tech with the technical colleges, with Georgia community colleges. So we're now coordinating all those efforts. And we found out that one area that we really were lacking was helping Georgia's communities, especially those rural communities, understand that there were more ways to do economic development than just recruiting new industries to town, that they really needed to focus on their own small businesses. And so we launched a program just under 2 years ago called the Entrepreneur Friendly Community Program, where we go out and we help Georgia communities look at their small businesses, identify where their needs are, and take them through this process. And to date, 22 of Georgia counties have gone through this process. Governor Perdue has designated them as entrepreneur friendly. They are doing programs from micro enterprise loans to new loan funds, to new downtown efforts, just a variety of activity all over the state, and 60 or so other Georgia communities are going through that process. So by the end of this year, we'll be getting pretty close to having half of all of Georgia counties saying publicly and formally that they're committed to helping Georgia small businesses. Another area that they might look at assisting is something called regulatory reform. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the governor signed a regulatory reform executive order just a few months ago in which he encourages or kind of mandates that all state agencies have a small business liaison, so that if a small business owner has a problem or an issue, there's a 1-800 number, there's a website to go to, and there's a process for them to work through their issues. And what we're trying to encourage local communities to do is to set up the same type of program, someone at the local level that a small business owner can call and talk to when they've got problems at the local level. As part of this effort, we have been doing a lot of work and listening sessions around the state with small business owners. And these are the results of several of these interview sessions that we've done. And what's interesting about these, as I walk you through them quickly, is that they really mirror work that's been done by NFIB, by the U.S. Chamber, and others with small businesses. The number one concern, and you heard it already this morning from Martin and others, and I'm not going to belabor it, but obviously trying to afford health care in Georgia, especially small companies in rural areas, is becoming more and more difficult. All small businesses, and a lot of you are small business owners, need access to capital. We've done some pretty innovative things this past year. One Georgia now has a small business loan program where we basically underwrite loans between $50,000 and $250,000 for Georgia small businesses. We've had 8 companies that have applied for that and now receive those loans in our rural areas. We had about $3 million in that pot last year. Hopefully in the coming year the governor will increase that allocation, or the One Georgia board. But that's we're working with a variety of companies, anything from a daycare center to a restaurant to a high-tech company are tapping into those loan funds. We also put aside $10 million last year for a strategic industries loan fund for One Georgia, for those companies that are investing in new technology, new patents. And though we haven't had anyone tap into that fund, we've used it a lot and we've gotten close, and we feel like we'll have some good projects in the coming year. We tend to see more and more micro-enterprise loan opportunities and companies trying to start in Georgia. DCA, Commissioner Beatty has really worked with a lot of those companies trying to help them find financing. And they'll do $10,000 to $20,000 loans for very small businesses that are trying to get started. But again, that's a definite area where small business is asking for help. And obviously, changes at the federal government, we don't have any control over that. But recent changes with Small Business Administration's loans and paperwork, small businesses continue to tell us that they wish we could make that easier. And as you can imagine, the other area where we hear a lot, workforce, the fact that we need talented workers, skilled workers, and the right work ethic. And I'll digress a little bit, but we're hearing more and more about workforce in a non-traditional way from our industrial prospects too. I think Novartis was a very big project that got a lot of attention recently. It was a vaccine facility that we lost to North Carolina. And it wasn't because we didn't have the incentives, because we put a little more incentives in it than North Carolina did. But at the end of the day, we did not have the workforce to compete against North Carolina. North Carolina was producing 800 bio graduates a year. We were producing 21. Another area that they spent a lot of time with us on was our dropout rate. And those are the kind of things nobody liked to talk about. But it used to be that we could go in and talk about Quick Start, and we could talk about our good universities and our good community colleges, and we could address workforce issues. But as we deal with more and more high-tech companies, those people are relocating here from around the world. They want to know that we've got good schools their kids can go to, but they also want to see that there's a pipeline of workers that are going to go from our high schools with some type of level of understanding about the type of career that they want into a technical college or into the university. And those are issues that we really have to spend more time working on from an economic development point of view as well as others. Obviously, anytime you do surveys with businesses, they want more assistance with taxes, tax incentives. An interesting one that we hear more and more is they want us to figure out a way to incentivize larger Georgia companies to do more business with small Georgia companies, more B2B activity, and are there opportunities and incentives there? We're entering into a new combined effort with Allen's group at SBDC to provide market research for small businesses. We heard this over and over that, I'm trying to start my own business, and the big businesses have research departments. They can review the market. They can know where to go. Small businesses don't have the same type of assets. And so later this year, Allen, we'll roll out that program together of trying to provide that market research for Georgia small businesses so they can do a better job of being strategic. Procurement with state government and with local governments is a big issue with small businesses. They find, as you can well imagine, it's very difficult to compete with larger companies when they're trying to get government contracts. And also they tell us that they've had issues with out-of-state competition getting Georgia contracts or getting local government contracts when they're not able to do that. There are some communities in Georgia that incentivize that. When I was running the chamber down in Hawkinsville, we had a thing that if you were a local, you're trying to get a local contract, you're a local business, if you were within 5% of the low bid, that therefore you would still be able to get that business locally. And that was very effective. Workers' comp has already been mentioned. I won't dwell on that. Particularly small businesses in rural areas need high-speed internet access. They need that infrastructure. Of course, One Georgia has the Bridge program now, but we still need opportunities, and we need to be able to help small businesses get access to high-speed internet. And then lastly, just general tax code and making Georgia an easier place. I think 2 years ago, thanks to y'all's help, you passed the governor's bill to try to streamline some of those tax deductions that small businesses have to do, where the Georgia code was a little different than the federal code. That's been a big boom. That's been a big help to small businesses. But for us to continue to look at those types of opportunities is very important. And, Mr. Chairman, we'll provide copies of this presentation in some more detail to y'all. We'll send it out to you, but I'll be happy to answer questions about the border communities or about the small business or anything that we can address.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
If my math serves me correctly, and the new jobs created last year, it looked like the expanding industries are existing industries 2 to 1.
That's about right.
Is that the right number statewide as a norm?
It is. We see nationally it's about 80% is existing industry growth, companies that are expanding. In Georgia, we're about, you're right, we're right in those numbers this year.
A lot of times we overlook our existing industries when we're going out looking for new industry or new jobs.
We do.
We don't realize what we have.
We do, and y'all passed a bill 2 years ago again that was very important. You actually said, if you're a Georgia company and you're growing here, not only can you get the incentives that a new company can get, but also y'all put in an existing industry bonus, which has really been a great thing. I was with a company just the other day, and they're looking at relocating from another state. This is the kind of company that we want in Georgia, just a great business. And what they told us was, and we weren't setting them up or anything, they said what's really bothered us is we went to our state, this other state, and we said we want to grow, we need some help growing it, and they told us there's nothing they can do for us. And so while we were there trying to sell them, what ended up I think is going to get us the deal is when we explained not only will you get these incentives when you come to Georgia, but as you grow when you're here, here's where you're going to benefit from it. And they smiled and said, well, finally we found somebody that gets this. We got a lot of work to do. I think there's still a lot of things we can do for existing industry in Georgia. A struggle that we have right now are those companies that are just trying to stay in Georgia. Maybe they're not growing, they're not adding adding jobs, they're not adding investment. They're just trying to decide, do we stay here and operate, or do we go somewhere else in the world? And right now, the incentives that we do have are set up only if you're increasing jobs or increasing investment, not just retention. And so communities have really struggled with that lately. What tools do they have at the local level? We don't have a lot of those tools at the state level either. It's another area we might want to take a look at.
Chris, we've got an economist recently make some comments about the outlook, future outlook of economic development for Georgia. Can you comment on that?
I think you're referring to the Laffer Report that was released recently, where Georgia was ranked the #1 business-friendly. Laffer was a economist under President Reagan. Supply side, a lot of times it doesn't. Other economists maybe don't always agree, but it's a very interesting study, and it's basically which states are pro-business, which ones have the right type of tax system. And the single-factor sales tax that was passed last year and being implemented now was a big factor in that. when y'all passed that bill and the governor signed it, we had lost about 3 prospects earlier in the year. Those 3 actually came back to us once y'all had done that and said, wait a minute, we'd like to reconsider Georgia again. And that's become a very big piece for us. It's difficult to try to explain it to companies at first, and we have to get their revenues, and we have to try to figure out, here's what your savings are. But it was a key thing when we were doing with Kia and a lot of these companies. It's been very important.
One thing I'd like to ask, I know in the last few years we were able to work to do some incentives for the movie industry and entertainment industry, and I think that has helped you in creating more jobs in Georgia and bringing those in here. And I wonder though, is it time, and I know y'all look at this from time to time, but we need to sort of rethink and relook some of our tax incentives that maybe we thought that was the right thing to do, but when you got out there and you try to apply them, sometimes it doesn't always come out and work the way that it was intended. Should we be revisiting some of those incentives or tax again?
Well, yes, sir. First of all, I'll say that film tax credit bill has made a world of difference. I can't drive anywhere. I can't get home at night anymore because they're filming movies all downtown around us, which is great. But what we've already seen with that bill, we had the intent, we put it out there, we were a leader for about 12 months, and now other states are introducing the same type of incentive bill, and we're going to have to address that. The biggest thing that made that bill unique and made it different from the other tax credits that we offer is you can take that against payroll withholding, and you can also sell those credits. Those are 2 key things with our R&D credit and with our job tax credits that you can't do unless you're in the poorest 40 counties in Georgia. You can't take those tax credits against payroll, and you can't sell them. And so if you don't quite have the tax liability, or if you're a high-tech company and you're operating in the red for the first 5 years that you're in operation, there are not a lot of benefits. And as y'all continue to improve the tax climate with the single factor, those job tax credits are less and less valuable. The tax credits for a company like Kia, might have been $30-40 million. You can argue all day whether or not they'll ever get that benefit from those tax credits.
Chris, on that note, as Georgia progresses and becomes more and more business friendly, and we're seeing more our industries change, technology come in, do you see or hear from our the industries that our tax laws were perhaps written 20-30 years ago, that we need, or there are certain areas that maybe need updating, and certainly as the world changes, we're operating in a different way than we operated 20-30 years ago?
We're hearing it, but in a different way. I'll let Ed maybe talk about talk about that at some point. But here, David, here's what we are hearing. It used to be that a company would come in and they would say, well, in South Carolina, their tax structure is like this, and we get tax credits like X, Y, and Z, or in Tennessee. Now they're coming to us, and they're not saying South Carolina, they're saying, well, in Singapore, there's this way that they're going to tax us and these credits that we get, and in Ireland, it's like this too. We're competing on a global stage, and as the economy grows and develops, so too, I think, must our tax system. The R&D credit, I think, is a good example. It's one that very few companies in Georgia use. Nobody in the U.S. is really doing the R&D tax credits as innovatively as they are doing them in other countries. And there's an opportunity for us there, I think, to come up with something very unique to encourage those high-tech companies to continue to come to Georgia. But, with everything, we every year we change how we do economic development because the game changes, and I think that would lend itself to every year I know that Ed and that team has to look at the taxes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be happy to. Thank you, sir.
Next, we'd like to have from the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, Joe Fleming and Leonard Hopkins to talk to us about tax issues.
Thank you, members of the committee. My comments are going to be brief, and they'll echo some of the things that were said at the Business Incentive Committee last week. My name is Joe Fleming with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. There are two premises, I think, that we have to start with when we look at the issues that this committee is looking at. One, that there's no doubt that Georgia is a great place to do business. Whether you look at the Laffer study or others, Georgia is an outstanding place to do business, historically has been, and great credit is due to the General Assembly and the administration for the many things that they've done to keep Georgia competitive and attractive. And they don't just involve the tax code. The key things like tort reform, improvements in the education system, are meaningful to companies when they determine whether they want to expand their existing workforce here in Georgia or whether a company wants to move and establish roots in Georgia. So there are a host of things that have brought us to a point where we are in a good shape. What I'm very excited about is that this committee and others are taking a very forward-looking approach to planning for the future. And what can we do today to ensure that Georgia continues the prosperity and enjoy the reputation that we have today as an attractive place for business. To parallel the work of this committee and other tax study committees, the Georgia Chambers created recently a Taxation and Business Incentive Committee. It's chaired by former Representative Terry Lawler, who's here today, and co-chaired by Guy Griswold. We had a meeting the other day of this committee and had over 70 Georgia Chamber members show up, which for one of our subcommittee meetings is a rather large number. And as demonstrated by the number of folks in this room, great interest in this issue, of course. The one issue I do want to share with you, we're in a process like you are of kind of identifying the things that we think are fiscally responsible, that are more than just a gimme, but actually play into a strategic policy for growth in the future. The one thing that we have agreed on and that we're going to be strong advocates for in the General Assembly this year is repeal of the sales tax on energy used in manufacturing. Many of the economic reports that have come out recently have talked about how well Georgia is doing, how rosy the forecast in the future is. The one sector of our economy that still hurts is manufacturing. And as Chris pointed out just a moment ago, it is in some parts a victim of global competition, but in some ways it's also a victim of cannibalization by our sister states in the Southeast. None of our sister states in the Southeast have a sales tax on energy the way Georgia does. So a company that is interested in building a new plant or facility might consider putting that in South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, because of the cost associated with that sales tax on energy. And of course, with the cost of natural gas and electricity having risen in the last several years, that sales tax is becoming an increasingly significant cost to manufacturers. And when I talk about manufacturers, I'm not just talking about the big machinery companies that might come to mind. We're talking also about small-town printers. We're talking about Publix, a company based in Florida, but that manufactures many of their own branded goods here in Georgia. We're talking about Babcock Furniture, which is currently looking at whether they want to build their new box springs and mattress facility in Florida or in Georgia. So I think one thing that the Chamber has agreed on, and will continue to be reviewing ideas as they come forward, is that an important thing we need to do for our economy is to keep the manufacturing sector in Georgia competitive. And repeal of the sales tax on energy, I think, is a significant way to keep Georgia competitive with our neighbors in the Southeast. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions or yield my time.
Been a proposal, maybe floated over the House last year about the future of the corporate income tax. You had to pick one of the two as a more immediate effect. Which one would you choose as the most immediate effect in manufacturing?
Based on the surveys of our membership and the meetings we've had on tax and incentive issues, at this time it would be the sales tax on energy.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you for the hospitality here. It's been wonderful to be in Swainsboro. Everybody's been terrific.
Thank you.
Next, we'd like to hear from Alan Adams and Robert Endo from the Small Business Development Center at the University of Georgia.
Thank you much for having us today. Wanted to going to hand out some information on the SBDC program if you're interested in looking at it later. I wanted to just give you a brief overview of what the SBDC program does in Georgia, working with entrepreneurs and small business owners. And then we, too, want to echo some of the comments other people have said about the burden various levels of taxes have on small businesses, and add one more item that you haven't heard about yet. The SBDC is a small business extension program offered by the University of Georgia and other units in the university system. We have 18 offices across the state. We provide a variety of business management, educational services related to business planning, market planning, accessing capital, financial analysis, cash flow management, pretty much the breadth of things that a small business owner-operator struggles with in making his firm successful. And part of that includes awareness of tax obligations and tax planning. We work with approximately 5,000 business owners or prospective entrepreneurs annually across the state. We're in just about every county in Georgia. On an annual basis, we have clients in over 150 counties. We see additional 10,000 plus people annually in our training programs. We offer 600 to 800 training programs a year dealing a lot of with these same issues that we work individually one-on-one with business owners. We are involved, our business consultants around the state work with business owners in obtaining over $60 million a year in startup and expansion capital. And that's primarily debt capital, not equity capital. From impact studies our program participates in on the effectiveness of our services, sales growth of firms that work with the SBDC are twice the average Georgia businesses. The Georgia business sales growth, job growth is several times the average Georgia business from these type firms. We work closely, as Jack mentioned earlier in his comments, we work closely with a lot of other small business and entrepreneur assistance programs in the state. As Chris was alluding to, some things we do with the Department of Economic Development. I'd like to say that one of the most significant changes in the last 20 years in Georgia's posture towards economic development is beginning to focus more intensely on job growth and wealth creation that can be accrued in local communities, particularly in rural communities, through a focus on small business, locally owned business growth. And I'm sure many of y'all are sympathetic to that because you're business owners yourselves. We do work with the department on the Entrepreneur Friendly Community Program, helping communities get ready to apply for that status. And we also we have an international trade group that works closely with the department's trade division on getting firms prepared to export. That can be a tremendous growth opportunity for small businesses and small manufacturers, but it is different than domestic business, and learning how to adjust to those changes, the lead times, the market planning, it can be a boon or it can be a killer if not handled properly. The average size of firm that the SBDC works with is 20 employees or less, which is 90% of the business establishments in Georgia and in the country are small businesses. Primarily retail and service in nature, although we do work with a large number of manufacturers, distributors, construction firms, and others. The SBDC program's been in Georgia for almost 30 years. It's pretty well established. We're well known to bankers, CPAs, chambers of commerce, and other economic development or business development entities. Firms come to us primarily referred by prior clients or by bankers or CPAs. They see young businesses. Two-thirds of the people we work with are already in business, but they're in early stages of growth or in expansion stages and may be struggling with a variety of issues. And these type of entities, bankers, CPAs, chambers, refer people to us. We don't do a lot of general advertising. We pretty much live off referrals from other business professionals. The average business owner is both owner and operator. And the biggest problem after sales and customer relations and market conditions for so many business owners is time. And you heard that alluded to earlier. and some of the comments about the myriad of taxes that small business owners have to deal with, keep track of. The cost of all that is a problem. The administrative cost to the business owner, that's a problem, but it's also a cost in time. One of the biggest problems we see for small business owners is taking time to work on their business and not just in their business. They can be a slave to the business to the point they can't really prepare for its growth and development. And that's something that our consultants try to work with business owners on. Make time to work on your business. Many business owners we deal with don't want us to meet with them in their firm because they can't focus on the conversation. One of the things that when we got invited to present here today, we had a meeting with all our field managers, and we talked about the various things y'all were likely to hear were a problem for small business owners related to taxes. And I was telling Representative Parrish on the phone the other day, and I'm sure y'all have heard this before, if you ask small business owners what can you as elected officials do to help them, they're going to say taxes and regulations. Well, which ones? And they're going to tell you all of them. You know, all of them are a problem. Just get rid of all of them. And while that'd be nice, that's not really practical, but there are some specific things, you've heard some today, that maybe could be looked at and addressed. And Robert Endo is with me. He's director of our office in Gwinnett County and oversees a number of our offices in the metro Atlanta area. And one issue we've worked with over Department of Revenue the last few years is sales and use tax. And he's going to tell you our experience from our field offices, what they see, and maybe give you some suggestions on that topic you could look at.
Thank you, Alan, and it's great to be here. It's good to wake up in the morning and not have to worry about rush hour traffic. So this is just right on target. So
he was very impressed how quickly we got here.
That is correct. That is correct. But basically, as Alan alluded to, I think one of the unique things about the SBDC network is the fact that we have a cadre of 47 consultants spread throughout the state of Georgia, and also offer, and these individuals provide one-on-one professional consulting, and the 18 centers that work together to provide a whole variety of training programs. And one of such programs that I think is kind of unique to the tax base in Georgia is the working relationship that we have enjoyed with the Georgia Department of Revenue, especially the Sales and Use Tax Division. For the last 15 years, we have actually co-sponsored all the comprehensive workshops with this particular entity. Basically, they provide the technical expertise, and of course, we pretty much assist in terms of the logistics, location, handling registrations, and all kinds of stuff. One of the unique things about this particular program is the fact that it affords the small business owner, the bookkeeper, the accountant, and the CPA the knowledge as relates to if there are any specific changes in the tax laws, because there are no specific forums to address changes in the tax laws. So a lot of our participants look forward to these workshops on a day-to-day basis. Also, in addition to that, the fact that this particular program is well promoted. Every sales tax return that is mailed to every small business entity has information about these programs. And I think that's one of the unique things that we have worked with the Department of Revenue in establishing those kinds of promotional campaigns to get the word out to the small business community. But just talking in general about the problems that the typical small business person faces, I think it's probably twofold. One is, do they really want to deal with the issues of taxes? Most of the clients that we deal with would prefer to have a CPA or an accountant handle their taxes. They're busy, they want to do other things. And of course, you have those small business owners that are wearing pretty much all the hats who have to do it. So they rely on us a lot to help them with the day-to-day how to fill out a sales tax return. Now you have sales tax return could be an easy one when you're just dealing with one county. But when you start dealing with multiple counties, then it gets real complex. So identifying ways to get them to complete these forms, understand basically the components, the exemptions, I think that that's something that we continue to strive and work with the Georgia Department of Revenue to try and get them to get that word out. And again, as part of the educational component that we strive to perfect. When you look at the IRS and some of the things that the IRS has done, for example, there are CD-ROMs that the IRS distributes to practically every business owner, just tell them basically the obligations as relates to federal taxes. That is something that we like to see on the state level. So somebody who just obtained a business license can go to a website and say, okay, this is how we do it. This is how a sales tax return is completed. Because sometimes it gets too late in the game, and then they panic, they freeze, and they say, well, I'm just not going to deal with it till I get caught. So what we want to do is try to, again, educate them early, make sure they fully understand the obligation, because I think it's important to the state of Georgia. Any questions?
Thank y'all for being with us. We appreciate what you do to help our small business people as well. Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from David Martinez. He's from Bartow County, and he's going to talk to us about a border community sales tax issue that I think will be of interest to us.
How you doing? Thank you very much for letting me speak. As he said, my name is Dave Martinez. I'm from Bartow County. I own a Suzuki dealership, motorcycles, ATVs. We sell Suzuki, Arctic Cat, Chemco, and Cumberland product. Currently, the Georgia Motorcycle Dealers Association is estimating that the state of Georgia is possibly losing about $2.9 million in potential tax. Most of that's related to sales tax. Some of it would come from payroll taxes from additional employees. But as a body, we're losing up to 30% of our off-road vehicle sales to out-of-state. And that number's huge. It could be about 4,000 units or about $34 million in revenue. Part of the problem, or the main problem, is if you live in Georgia and you go to Tennessee or Alabama or any of the border states, you don't have to pay tax. And when you come back into the state, right now there is no way to track the unit. So they go up, they buy it tax exempt, they come back into Georgia and they never register it. So Georgia loses the sales tax. We lose the sale. As I said, we're thinking it's about 4,000 units per year, which is it's a large number. It's about 30% per dealer. At a recent meeting with the Georgia Motorcycle Dealers Association, we came up with an action list. We've got a lot of items on there, most of which are related to tax. But the one that went straight to the top is we need to do something to regulate this, to level the playing field so we're not losing these. Many of you folks in here own businesses, so you know how it is. It's tough, like they were just saying. You wear 27 different hats. You do a little bit of everything. You don't really have the time to go out and chase all this, all the tax stuff and learn how it all works. The customers don't know either. A lot of them just aren't educated. They go out of state and think, well, I don't need to pay it. They don't think about, the state of Georgia needs their tax money. We can't keep up. The dealers that are doing this out of state are spending huge money on advertising. One dealer in Tupelo, Mississippi, Lake Hill Motors, they're 326 miles from my store. They spend $55,000 a year to advertise in our local trader, the ATV trader publication. Great Outdoor Store in Tennessee, 376 miles away, spends about $30,000. The worst one is in Tennessee. They spend $130,000 a year in advertising in Georgia. And I brought some examples of what they do, and they make these nice big go to Tennessee and buy and save 7%. They're inviting our residents to leave Georgia, take the business from us, go to Tennessee, and not pay the tax. Some people say, well, as a dealer base, you need to compete with them, advertise, educate your customers. We just don't have that kind of money. These folks are selling the one in Tennessee sells 8,000 units a year. He's in Chattanooga. Do the math. There's not enough people up there buying ATVs. They're coming from right here, and they're going right through Bartow County to go up there and get them. What we've come up with, well, last year, House Bill 1004 was written. It didn't pass, but it addressed the registering of ATVs and off-road vehicles. But it also had a bunch of safety issues with it. I printed it out for the last couple of weeks and was giving it to customers and to my employees and said, guys, what do you think about this? The resounding response was, it's too complicated. It's just more taxes, and we don't want to pay more taxes. And trust me, I'm not here saying I want to pay more taxes, but it's revenue that we need to get that's sales tax. So I went to my customers and I said, well, what can we do to make this easier? What do y'all suggest? We'll take all the safety issues off. The Consumer Product Safety Council has a lot of strict guidelines. When we as a dealer sell an ATV, we have to follow these guidelines. If we don't, we can get fined, get stiff penalties, or lose our franchise. So we stick to those. The federal government's got guidelines that address the safety issues. The ones that Georgia had were more stringent than both of those bodies. Personally, and from what the customer said, let's let the federal government and the Consumer Product Safety Council handle the safety issues. Let's just look at this. And then the customers that would respond positively to paying tax, that understand that it goes to paying for schools, paying for the police department, paying for the roads you drive on, came up with this idea with one of my employees. Why don't we do, Nevada's got something similar. If you buy it from me here in Georgia, we pay the tax. We get a little green sticker that goes by your serial number. We affix it to the unit. Doesn't cost anybody hardly any money at all for the little bitty sticker. We record the number. We send it into the state with the tax. It'll do two things. When people buy in Tennessee and the police departments around pull over people with ATVs during hunting season, they're checking for licenses, and also because so many ATVs are stolen. They're checking the serial numbers. They're going to look and see that serial number, and they don't see the little green taxes paid decal. They just kindly remind them that they need to pay the tax, record it, and then follow up with them. It's a way that we can pursue getting some of this up to almost $3 million in sales tax. This morning talking with somebody, he said, well, what about the golf carts, which is something I never even thought about. All the golf carts that are being sold now, they're non-registered too. There's no sales tax being collected on those if they're bought from out of state. But the system that we came up with, everybody said, the people that I bounced it off said it's too simple. It just makes too much sense and it's too easy. No one's going to buy it. I don't know if it's the perfect system, but a system needs to be put in place to recoup this money, to protect. We've been talking about small businesses in Georgia. I mean, it's tough out there. Everybody that owns a small business knows. You cut, during the summer, you turn the air conditioner down a little bit. During the winter, it's a little bit cooler. You just throw on an extra jacket. You're trying to save money. So at the end of the year, hopefully you made at least a little bit. If we could, as the dealers, if we could recoup that 30% of the business we're losing, our fixed expenses are already done. That's our profit. Now we can expand. When I go to dealer shows and talk to folks, where are you from? I'm from Atlanta. Oh, yeah, we looked at putting a dealership out there, but y'all are getting hammered by people going out of state, aren't you? Yep. So Georgia is not only losing the tax there, they're losing in businesses coming in. I want to expand. I want to put another dealership up in Dallas. But there's no way I can do it because that's a strong ATV market. Those folks are going right up the road to Tennessee or going to Alabama to buy. They're not going to buy from me. So I can't afford to expand. I can't take the chance. Again, I don't know if this system's the best one or the easiest, but what was done with HB 1004 was a little too complicated. If we can make it simple and get it through, it's going to help out Georgia business immensely, motorcycle dealers.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions today?
If I'm not mistaken, streamline sales tax would correct your situation as well.
But we've got to register the units somehow. And that's the other thing. The dealers have decided amongst us that we'll take the responsibility. We'll do whatever, if the legislature says, all right, we're going to do this, but now it's up to the dealers to administer to it, to maintain it, we're willing to do it. It means that much to our business.
Hey, thank you. If you would, how about
written letter from your group outlining your action list or these suggestions that you give us so that could become part of our meeting and we can look at those ideas as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Next, we'd like to hear from Mike Barker with the Georgia Restaurant Association. Mike, want to come up?
Thank you very much, and good morning. I'm Mike Vackwer. I'm here today representing the Georgia Restaurant Association. And we are here today to talk about a quirk in Georgia's sales and use tax law that, in fact, is presenting a disincentive for our restaurant operators doing the right thing. I'm sure that there are not many people in this room who are aware that gifts of prepared food by restaurants to 501c3 organizations, soup kitchens, and the like to feed the poorest of the poor are taxable. 6% to 7% use tax is applied to these donations. And I've got to tell you, for a lot of our members, this serves as quite a disincentive for the donation of these foods. In addition to the cost that they incur in preparing these meals, which are in excess of their needs on a daily basis, they frequently have to package, prepare, and then transport these donations to soup kitchens and the like, and to add an additional 6 to 7% onto this cost is just a burden. What we are asking on behalf of the restaurants is that the General Assembly consider what we are calling the Good Samaritan exemption. And very simply, this would add yet another sales tax exemption, but a very worthy sales tax exemption to the 82 that are currently out there. This would very simply say that the donation of prepared foodstuffs would be exempt from use tax. And that's as complicated as the language gets. Georgia would not be alone in enacting this kind of legislation and adopting this language. Tennessee and Florida already have statutory exemptions. This legislative year, the state of Alabama also enacted similar legislation to incent this right kind of activity. Removing this unintended and unnecessary obstacle, we think, will help more of our most vulnerable, hungry, and needy residents of this state to receive daily nourishment. The potential revenue cost of this should be very minor and may be insignificant, because we have two factors that are operating. I would venture to say that a lot of our operators are not aware that they are liable for the use tax on donated food, and those larger operations that have very sophisticated accounting and tax operations are aware and unfortunately make the decision that they are not going to add an additional 6 to 7% to their operating cost plus the cost of transporting this food, and so unfortunately this food winds up going in the dumpster out in the back of the restaurant. We will provide language to you for your consideration. As I said, it is a very easy fix, and we think would be the noble thing to do to help incent this kind of activity from our businesses with the adoption of the Good Samaritan exemption. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that you would have.
If I can, Mike, and if Ed might comment on this as well. You know, we had this past year, Chairman O'Neill and members of the Ways and Means Committee and in the Senate helped us get through the language that bona fide nonprofits that were buying food for preparation were treated the same way as citizens of Georgia. Previously, right, since they were buying it for preparation, they were having to pay tax, which went through the legislature with no, I don't think there was a dissenting vote in committee or either the House and the Senate, because it does make sense. It means $100 in contribution to a nonprofit buys $100 worth of food instead of $93 worth of food. Ed, does that wouldn't stretch with a policy decision to cover this till we could get to it legislatively? If that nonprofit were to, maybe not. It seems like it puts you on make him answer the.
I think to answer your question, Martin, I don't think it would stretch. There are a number of things that a lot of businesses buy and then donate to nonprofits.
Right.
This is just one of those.
Right.
So I think it could be, unless you specifically exempted the donation to a nonprofit, which is not the case with you. You allow nonprofits to go out and purchase things for their own use. This would be a restaurant buying their own food, and they got food left over, and they want to donate it to a nonprofit with no charge. So it's use under our law,
Right.
it's use for them, so you have to have a specific exemption. And there's a lot of items that are donated that way. Some donations are exempt, like the university system.
And I guess I'm just trying to find out, because, and I certainly don't want to do anything against our statute, but if that nonprofit were to buy that food from the restaurant under the current law for $1, would that not kick in the statute and they would be able to buy it tax-free and they wouldn't be able to? No? Okay.
Generally not, because prepared foods aren't under the normal food exemption.
Right.
Fair enough.
This rule that the Department of Revenue operates under, I think, dates back to 1965, and it defines that the use tax applies to the cost of property purchased originally for resale and later used as a gift. The language that was adopted this year exempts sales of eligible food and beverages to a qualified food bank, but it does not address prepared food, and so that's what we're asking.
Fair enough.
Any other questions? Well, Mike, I'm sure we can depend on you to provide us with some language.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last presenter today is Dr. David Sokas from Georgia State. He has met with us before at a couple of our other meetings and has sort of brought everything together and framed the subjects and issues and things that we've been interested in. And David, certainly you being last is not a reflection of the fact that we wanted you to be last. We wanted you to be and sort of wrap up everything for us. And we thank you for coming and being with us as you have in the past.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. I'm not sure I can do a great job of wrapping up, but I'm going to try. And I want to talk about some issues about the border tax issues. To remind you, a couple of meetings ago I came and we talked about tax collectability. I handed out some overheads, but we've written up that document, and it's now in process to be published, and we'll get that to you as soon as we can. I actually talked to Ed Manny about some of the numbers we had in it, and he's going to share his numbers, and we're going to probably do some modifications. Economists talk about the kinds of desirable features of a tax structure, and fairness is one of those. Tax equity is another of those. But a third that we like to talk about is minimizing the incentives or disincentives of the tax systems or the taxes. Now, economists believe that all taxes have some effect. They're going to change behavior in some way. We're just not sure how big they are. In some cases, they're probably so small they can't be measured, and so we find frequently that there's no measurable effect. The hotel-motel tax, for example, at the current rate, probably discourages a couple of people from residing in a hotel some night. May discourage somebody from having convention in the town, but it's probably pretty small at current rates. On the other hand, we believe that the difference in insurance taxes in Georgia relative to other states is fairly significant and has a big effect upon the location of insurance companies. And we're in the process of doing a study to try to measure that effect. How large the effect is, how much business is lost or how much trade is shifted, depends upon the tax rate or the tax differential, if you're talking about border tax kind of issues, and how responsive businesses or the consumer is to that tax. And that's the kind of issues that are being raised here tax differentials, and in the case of the all-terrain vehicles, how many people are willing to drive 400 or 500 miles to save 7%. The point was made about the changing, I guess when Chris Clark was talking about the changing economy. Globalization means that businesses and workers are much more mobile, which means they're much more responsive to tax differentials. And what we've been doing, in my mind, is taking economic development incentives and trying to placate some of that competition between countries and states. But eventually what's going to have to happen is that the tax rates on businesses are going to have to go down to the level where we basically cover the cost of providing the public services to those businesses, if they're at all mobile. If you've got gas companies, natural gas or oil companies, where they can't move, right? They're going to pump from the well and they can't move those wells. That's not a factor. But the manufacturing business, eventually the states are going to have to tax them only on basis of what it's costing to provide their services. You have to do all that, however, still fund government, and that's the tricky part. So let me, I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about sales tax along the border of Georgia, property taxes along the border of Georgia, and then the inventory tax. There is a handout of the notes, overheads, and then I left a policy brief that contains more information about the border tax issue on the sales tax. This was done about 1.5 years ago, and so the rates may have changed a little bit. The local option taxes come and go, and so some of those that we have at 6 or 7% may be different today. But in general, if you look at that map, almost all of Georgia's border counties within Georgia, have a tax rate of state and local of 7%. Okay? There's just a few that have a 6% rate. Okay? Now, if you work your way around the clock, and start up there at basically noon, the purple up there, that's Tennessee. They have rates which are higher than Georgia. So all the Tennessee rates are higher, and these include both state and local. And they're up at 9.25%. Next over is North Carolina, and their rates are 7%. Okay? Those are the general general sales tax rates. They tax food at less than 7%. They tax food at 2.5%. Georgia taxes it basically at 3%, the local tax. Along the South Carolina border, they're generally at a lower tax rate than Georgia. Okay? They're at 5 and 6%. The big blue in Georgia is Burke County, and just above that is Richmond. So you see that Richmond is at 7%, and across the border it's 6%. So that's one of the big centers of population where there's a tax differential. Go down to Florida, and Florida is either at or above what Georgia taxes. Okay? They're at either 7 or 7.5%. But Florida exempts food from all taxes, and so there's a differential on food across the border there. Now moving up along the Alabama border, Georgia is generally higher, with well, there's some ties, but then there's one exception where it's somewhat higher. The purple on the Alabama border is about where Muskogee County is. Okay? So Muskogee is facing about an 8% or 7% across the border tax. The 6% is Chattahoochee County. So Georgia is not way out of line relative to its borders on the general sales tax. There's some differential. Now, there's some specific items like cars that are taxed at different rates. Okay? As was mentioned when we were talking about automobiles, that's not included in those rates. So some commodities like food, automobiles are taxed differently. We haven't done that. There's been a number of studies that have been done in other parts of the country trying to measure the effect of tax differential on cross-border shopping. That is, people in one state or county shopping in another county simply because of the differential tax rate. And generally, these studies find that a 1 percentage point difference, and it's 5 to 6% or 3 to 4%, results in a sales tax, in the sales tax, results in about a 1 to 6% decrease in sales in the higher taxing jurisdiction. Most of the estimates are down around the 2 to 3%. 6% is sort of an outlier. Okay? But that gives you a range of the kind of responsiveness. Now, that responsiveness depends upon the accessibility of the county and the taxing, and the income of the taxpayer. Okay? Accessibility along most of Georgia borders is not bad. You have the Chattahoochee River and along the Alabama border, and that's harder to cross. And you've got Savannah River, which is harder to cross. So you've got some issues there. You've got issues of where the retailing is along the border, other than Augusta, Columbus, and Chattanooga. You don't have major concentrations of retailing along the border, and so there's not a lot of opportunity to do that. If you do a quick calculation about what you could save by traveling, using the IRS cost per mile figure, 44.5 cents, if you took a 10-mile round trip, you would have to purchase $445 of sales to save money on a 1% differential. Okay. It would cost you more to make the trip than you'd save in sales taxes. Even if you took a $3 a gallon gasoline price and 20 miles to the gallon, you'd have to have a sale of about $300 before the tax differential pays for that additional gasoline. So smaller packages, smaller items are not likely to be affected by this cross-border if the transit is all lengthy. If you go to 7% difference, you just multiply that by 7 times, and you can see why you could travel quite a ways for larger commodities. So there's not a huge amount of difference across the border, and we don't think that there's a lot of responsiveness in general. Okay, the property tax differential, this is a work in progress. We've been trying to calculate property taxes along the border in all the counties, like we do with the sales tax. It's much more difficult because of the complexity of the property tax. We've got to figure out the assessment ratios, which vary by product or by property. We've got to figure out the rates for counties and cities and school boards and so forth. And we're not sure we have it all right yet, so it's not ready for prime time. But our calculations suggest that along the Florida and North Carolina borders, property taxes on, say, $100,000 property are about the same. They'll differ from county to county, but on average they're about the same. But they're lower in Alabama, South Carolina, and Tennessee than they are in Georgia. So there's some differential there. We haven't done anything with this yet, but there are some differences. And it clearly has an implication for inventories. Now, property tax and inventory. We calculate that there's 12 states that tax inventory. There was a survey done by IAAO back in '99 that said there were 15 states that tax inventory. There was a study that was published in State Tax Notes last year that said there were 13. We've calculated, we've gone through the law, we find 11, so we split the difference and we say there's 12. Indiana is doing away with it. Some allow local option, much more so than we do with the Freeport. There are no border states that have an inventory. That's been stated before. But most of the 11 or 12 states that have inventory taxes are in the South. Okay? Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Kentucky. We did some calculations, and inventory accounts for about 5% of the tax base for property tax purposes. And that would lead to a revenue loss at the local and state levels of somewhere between $250 and $300 million. We haven't done that calculation. ACCG has done that, and they get $270 as the revenue effect. So it's fairly significant. 5% is not a big number, but it's applied to a big base. We also calculated the inventory as a percent of the base for all the counties for which we had data. There were 2 counties which we do not have the property tax records. You see that for most states, for most counties, inventory is less than 6% of the property tax base. But there are 6 for which it's 10% or more. So for some of them, it's fairly significant. I don't have the names. I didn't bring the names of the counties if you have that question. But it's a significant issue. We don't know how important it is. There was a study that was done in Indiana a few years ago that estimated the effect of the property tax rate on the value of inventory across their counties. And they find that it had an effect. That the higher the property tax rate, the lower the inventories. We've reproduced that study for Georgia, and we find no effect. The tax rate does not explain any of the variation in property tax, in inventory. This is a simple table. I simply took inventory reported in the property tax base, divided by the number of workers in the county, and plotted that against the millage rate within the county. County rate, the school rate, and the property tax rate for the largest city in the county. And you see that there's not much of a pattern there. There's a trend line that's downward sloping. Higher rates have lower inventory per worker, but it's not significant. I mean, if you'd simply look at the county and school rates, exclude the city rates, you get a positively sloped line. So for Georgia, it doesn't appear that there's a big effect. We're continuing to work with this, but this is, at least preliminarily, what it suggests. So those are my comments. I'd be happy to answer questions.
What is, this is information for me, but what is the history, what was the beginning of the inventory tax? What started the inventory tax?
That's the history of the property tax. The property tax originally was based upon units, number of cows you had, the number of acres, the number of slaves. That's what calculated was the base of the property tax. In the 1900s, that changed to a value base. So we have an ad valorem tax. And at the time, the base was everything. So all property, tangible, intangible, personal, and real property was taxed. Household furnishings were taxed. That was part of the base. Over time, the base has shrunk. Household personal property, sofas and pots and pans, that was eliminated. You really couldn't figure out what the value was or how much people had. That was eliminated. We've eliminated, over time, the intangible tax. We no longer tax the value of stocks and bonds and checking accounts and so forth. We've eliminated, a lot of states have eliminated cars from the base. A lot of states have eliminated manufacturing equipment from the base. And now a lot of states have eliminated inventory. So it started out with a very broad property tax base, and what's happened is it simply shrunk. It wasn't that we added inventory. It's that other states eliminated inventory as they shrunk the base.
Thank you for bringing this interesting information. One thing, let me ask you to make sure I understood something that you said. I think you said no bordering state has inventory tax to go. Is that
No bordering state taxes inventory in their property tax.
That's kind of interesting. Thank you very much for that.
Appreciate it.
Informative presentation. Have a question out here?
Well, I was going to add to what the gentleman just said. Representative Stevens will remember that when we met in November, there were business owners in Savannah who came and addressed the meeting, who built their distribution centers and warehouses across the river in South Carolina for exactly that reason. There are other distribution centers. One gentleman mentioned my company, the home office in Florida, is considering building a mattress and box spring manufacturing facility. One of the things they have to take into consideration is if they build it in Florida or any other bordering state, there'll be no inventory tax. So there are businesses building distribution centers and warehouses on the borders simply to avoid that inventory tax. Excuse me for interrupting.
That's a good point.
And I believe that's happening.
Let me ask a question for Chris Clark. Chris, if you could, you may not be able to answer this, but sort of check through your office there in your department and let us know just how large of an issue that is, the fact that we have an inventory tax and our neighboring states do not. I mean, that's something that might be significant.
It's also part of what we'll be looking at as we do the study. We do know that in addition to companies operating warehousing facilities out of state, we learned a couple of years ago, we were doing a fiscal note, that there are airplane dealers who around the first of the year get their plane in the air and fly to another state, so they have no inventory come January 1st, and then they fly back. So people do, there's an incentive, and people do a variety of things.
Thank you very much. Representative Roy, you have a question?
Joe Fleming, you still here?
Yes, sir.
Question. I want to revisit the question that Senator Hill asked you about the energy tax as compared to the corporate income tax repeal.
Yes, sir.
What percentage of total business jobs in the state of Georgia manufacturing?
Well, it's the largest sector, depending on how you define it. I mean, I would include sectors of the agriculture industry as in manufacturing. Chris probably knows better. I think the number's, I want to say 29%, but I think 29%
of the total jobs are business or manufacturing.
Or manufacturing. And
okay, in light of that, let me ask you that question again. Considering all businesses, which would mean the most, the repeal of the corporate income tax or the energy exemption?
We're not opposed to repeal of the corporate income tax.
You made a statement that the energy tax would mean more. Well, that's only to industry.
Yeah, I'm trying to give you a snapshot of how our internal discussions are going, and the one issue that I think we think is fiscally responsible and meaningful to a sector of the economy that is still hurting,
right,
and that's manufacturing, is the sales tax on energy. We lost 100,000 manufacturing jobs in Georgia in a 5-year period between 1999 and 2004. Corporate income tax repeal would be glad to have that too. Part of the reality is that depending on what the legislature does and this committee recommends on exemptions would probably impact our the priority of corporate income tax.
Corporate income tax repeal would take more people.
Well,
throw in
theoretically, that's true. I think that there are a number of exemptions and credits that are currently in law, so that the number of people that are paying corporate income tax is not as broad as you might think. But if a number of those credits and exemptions were removed from the code, then the impact would be much broader.
Just to follow up, if I may, Mr. Chairman, and I know we're running late in the hour, but to throw a supposition out is one could suppose that if energy, if the tax off energy in the manufacturing sector was removed, that manufacturing jobs wouldn't leave Georgia. Perhaps more manufacturing jobs would come to Georgia. Perhaps all those corporations that are doing business in Georgia that provide services to those manufacturing companies and or their employees would have more, would have potential for more business. So, I mean, it looks like your members, if that in fact is their focus, and again, not saying that they would not like the corporate income tax removed as well, but it looks like their focus is sort of broad in the overall good of Georgia rather than specifically looking for a tax break that may not yield an economic incentives to help Georgia. So I guess I'd sort of applaud your members on looking at a holistic view of it, of a tax break that would in fact, while it might not affect everybody's bottom line tax bill, would perhaps affect Georgia's overall economy.
I appreciate your comments, and I agree with them. And as Terry, if he's still here, he may want to chime in. But a significant part of our discussion within the chamber is to be forward-thinking in terms of what will actually translate into new investment in Georgia and new jobs. There's going to be a lot of people, as you know, at the legislature this year asking for tax breaks and money and exemptions. And I'd be happy to give you a list of 30 that we'd like to see enacted. And our work is not finished. We're still researching and looking at other issues. But the one that I do believe that a broad section of the Chamber membership supports is a repeal of the energy tax in manufacturing. The Chamber also supports the repeal of the inventory tax. We have significant retail presence within the Georgia Chamber. And there are some that feel strongly about the corporate income tax repeal too. But we've got to sift through those in a responsible way and make our priorities, and they're subject to change as well. So.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments or questions from the Senator's representatives? I want to thank the audience for coming. You've been very patient. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to offer a comment? If not, we're going to adjourn. I want to thank all of you for coming. Thank you for your participation. Dr. Black, thank you for the folks here at the school. In the next meeting, wait. If you could, I'd like to see, when we get through, I'll see all the presenters and the members up here for just a second. Our next meeting is going to be September the 21st. That's on a Thursday at Lake Lanier. Representative Mills will be hosting that up there, and it's at 1 p.m., right?
Whatever it says on there, yes.
Thank you all for coming.